Good morning. Welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Church of Palo Alto, where we come to transform ourselves and each other and the world. I welcome you to turn your video on throughout the service if you wish, and just for right now to turn your audio on so we can all hear one another say hello and good morning. Hello, good morning. Please have a look in your order of service to follow along and see lots of announcements of things that are coming up. That link is there in the chat. And I want to particularly note here in the main hall that Hotel de Zinc is with us this month. If you haven't signed up yet to bring a meal and you would like to, just go to the website. You'll follow where you can do that. Yeah, there we can see some beds along the sides here of our guests all settled in. And enjoying this beautiful space all evening and into the morning for the month of September. So please join us in welcoming them by providing a meal. You can see that on the UUCPA website. And now let us begin our service. If you have a chalice there with you, please light it along with me as our worship associate Joe Bailey shares these words from the Reverend Florence Kaplow.
In recognition of Labor Day, we light this flame to honor all work, including the work of our hands, heads, and our backs, in gratitude for all the labors that support our world and for all those who boldly continue the work of justice, equity, and peace. With our centering words each week, we draw on the many sources of our living tradition. Today's words are from Henry David Thoreau. If a man walk in the woods for love of them half of each day, he is in danger of being regarded as a loafer. But if he spends his whole day as a speculator, shearing off those woods and making the earth bald before her time, he is esteemed an industrious and enterprising citizen.
As we follow the sound of the bell into silence, let us become centered and fully present in this place together. Now will you join me in singing Swimming to the Other Side? We are living beneath the great big dipper. We are washed by the very same rain. We are swimming in the stream together, some in power and some in pain. We can worship this ground we walk on, cherishing the beings that we live beside. Now let us turn our thoughts to the important events of our lives, which we wish this community to share, and open our hearts to those shared by one another. If you have a joy or a sorrow you would like me to speak, please send your joys and sorrows to joyconcern@uucpa.org or post them in the chat box provided by Zoom, and they will be shared aloud. Let's take a moment now to hold all that we've heard. So many joys and sorrows and gratitude for narrow escapes and hopes among us. Many more, as always, that are unspoken, not given words, but that live in our hearts, and they live in this community. So let us hold all of them tenderly, lift up our prayers for those who need them, nurture our own compassion in a moment of meditation. Blessed be. Let's sing together as Bruce leads us in singing, "We Are Building a New Way."
When I was growing up, one stereotypical question asked of kids was, "What do you want to be when you grow up?" And even as I now approach my 60th birthday, I'm still asking myself that question. I think the question itself of what do you want to be when you grow up is rather out of date and potentially even harmful. It implies a static society where once you become a police officer or firefighter, astronaut or stockbroker, doctor or president, your life choice has been made and your career box is ticked off. That has never worked for me, and I've been at this work thing for a long time. 43 years ago, my first job was at Wendy's at the corner of Bascom and Union in San Jose. It's still there today, and I sometimes go by just for fun. There's no pretense that someone feels it's their life's work to create your hamburger and fries and chocolate frosty, but yet they do it. You pay your money and you get food. And as a reminder, be kind to restaurant workers. As an adult, I've been through many career development workshops or books, and have usually stumbled at the beginning. Many of them start with the idea of defining your life's mission and then building a plan to achieve your life's mission. I'm sorry, I can't do it. I seem to be accumulating an ever-growing scrap pile of books and binders and workbooks. I was recently talking to my son about how I changed jobs a few months ago. I stayed with the same company, but moved from the quality organization into research and development, a pretty big change in roles. My son asked me if that was my dream job, and I had to say no, but it's the right job for me right now, which I think reflects maybe a healthier way to think about work. I have learned to forgive myself for a lack of a lifelong unifying mission. I'm happier asking what needs to be done now or what should I do next. I feel if you're walking an unfamiliar path in a thick fog and come to a junction in the path, all you can do is pick the path you think is best next. It may not be the perfect path, but what else can you do? However, I do think it is very helpful and important to understand your values and to make sure what you do is aligned with your values. That part of career development does resonate with me. You may not know your ultimate destination, but I think it's important to check in on your moral compass to make sure you're heading in the right direction. And this concept is certainly not new. In Buddhism, one of the elements of the Noble Eightfold Path is right livelihood. Following right livelihood means that our job should not be unwholesome, should not be morally corrupting, or one that hurts sentient beings. When I take the time to really stop and reflect on my job, I ask myself some version of, am I part of the solution or part of the problem? And do I like who I am while I am doing this job? If I don't like the answers to those questions, then it's time to change something. Prior to the pandemic, the world was already changing. To keep up with the cost of living, many people were working multiple jobs, and that trend was only accelerating with gig work. And then the pandemic turned the world upside down for work. The value proposition for entire industries got reshuffled. No wonder people are questioning the future of work. What work really needs to get done, and how do we get it done? How do we compensate people fairly and equitably? And part of that rethinking of the question of what do you want to be when you grow up? Proper answers may well be a person whose value is not defined by their job, or a person who does many things on their path to enlightenment. And I do hope we get there. And today's reading is from the book, from the Zen and the Art of Making a Living by Lawrence Bolt. I did change the wording a little bit to make it more gender neutral. Life is a masquerade ball. We are all wearing costumes and masks. These help us mark the roles we are playing at any particular time. While we keep in mind their purpose, role masks serve us well. When we confuse ourselves with our roles or forget that we are choosing to play a game, roles become oppressive, capable of turning even young men and women into cardboard stiffs. In The Art of Loving, Erich Fromm describes the condition of the modern person caught up in a game they have forgotten they chose to play. Fromm describes a nowhere man who has become so attached to his masks that he has forgotten how to play and how to love. Fromm calls this nowhere man an automaton. He has been transformed into commodity. experiences life forces as investments, which must bring him the maximum profit obtainable within existing market conditions. But the postmodern person is not an automaton, rather an alive and loving player in the game of life. He or she is a player, not in the sense of being a shrewd manipulator, but in the sense of one who is game for life and ready to play. The automaton struggles for ends. They want to have something that is fixed in time. For example, a title, a position, rewards of every kind. The player plays an open-ended game. The player wants to do something, and that changes. The career game that you choose to play ought to attract you and be fun for you. Even so, beware the trap of hiding in it, of losing your spontaneity and humanity for the sake of the role. Players remember that they have put on masks and to take them off. And every now and then, even while they are wearing them, they lift them just a little bit and peek through. The player also knows that they can fall into the automaton habit, not only by concretizing into their role, but by taking the roles of others too seriously. Often we forget that the police officer or doctor, the university professor or boss, the secretary or food server is so much more than the role each plays in our lives. Players relate to people first and foremost as human beings, and only secondarily to their roles. Players see, honor, and love the one behind the mask. And I think that's a good reminder for Labor Day, to see, honor, and love the ones behind their labor masks.
Around 1800, a national news magazine, a weekly called the Niles Register, noted that, quote, factory work was not for able-bodied men, but rather better done by little girls from 6 to 12 years old. And often it was. By 1820, children had begun to make up more than 40% of the mill employees in at least 3 New England states where mills were big business. Those who approved of this state of affairs implied that children who didn't bring in an income were lazy and wasteful, producing nothing towards their own maintenance. Employing children prevented, quote, the growth of a future dependent class, unquote. As the historian Michael Schumann notes, quote, the concern about idle youths did not appear to be one shared by the upper classes, unquote. Wealthy parents worked and saved for their children. Poor ones used their children to help the family bring in enough income to survive. And this backfired sometimes because employers preferred to hire children over their parents, who had to be paid more. And so that little girl of 6 years old could end up the only earner for a family. It took decades of struggle to reverse this. State by state, legislatures would reluctantly limit child labor. For example, limiting a child's workday to 10 hours if they were under 12 years old. Reformers would succeed in, say, getting the work week shortened from 56 to 54 hours. And in response, mill owners would speed up the machines so that production would be unaffected. This, of course, only made the work more dangerous. Reformers tried to make it safer, and this, too, was the struggle of many years. So were a minimum wage, pensions, sick leave, vacation, and breaks to take care of biological needs, each one a hard-fought victory. Labor leaders and workers, not surprisingly, led the way, but some owners and industrialists made their mark too. Henry Ford and W.K. Kellogg, of car and cereal fame, respectively, cut their workdays, increased pay to make up for it, or more, and saw productivity increase, which nudged their competitors to be open to shorter hours for their workers as well. As Henry Ford reasoned, and I hate to cite positively such a notorious anti-Semite here on the eve of the Jewish high holidays, but he was a mixed bag, Henry Ford. One of the good things he said, and a practical thing too, was that he wanted his workers to be able to afford his cars. And in fact, companies like his helped to create an American middle class that could do just that, actually have their lives improved by the goods that they were helping to bring to market. So through leaders like this, pressure from organized workers, and slowly, legislation, the U.S.-American workplace became more humane. Not for all work sectors, but for many, conditions improved. The weekend grew from 1 or maybe 1.5 days to 2 full days off. The work week shrank to 40 hours, with overtime being optional and paying extra. A minimum wage was established in 1938 and has been raised 22 times. Children received an education instead of earning their keep. The workplace became safer. For many proclaimers of the American dream, dating back to the days of the colonies, the plan was for this progress to continue, giving us more leisure in a thriving economy. That's part of what they meant by quality of life, by a standard of living. Not just enough money for our needs and our wants, but more leisure. In 1956, while running for re-election as vice president, Richard Nixon gave a campaign speech that led to the New York Times front page headline, "Nixon foresees 4-day work week, says GOP policies, Republican policies, assure fuller life for family." But, in fact, since 1956, things have stalled. And like a Model T run out of gas, began to roll backward downhill. For example, in 1970, the year the Occupational Safety and Health Agency, OSHA, was created in a bill signed by President Nixon, dangerous working conditions caused nearly 14,000 fatalities. That was in 1970. Thanks to OSHA and other laws, that number came down to a low of 4,500 in 2009, in a bigger workforce as well. But that was 12 years ago, and the numbers have been creeping back up. Our hours are getting longer, not shorter like Nixon dreamed of and promised. That 8-hour day that Dolly Parton sang about in 9 to 5 of 30-odd years ago now seems quaint. Today, Nabisco workers, unionized no less, are on strike to end the practice at their factories of 16-hour days. The federal minimum wage froze in 2009 at $7.15 an hour. But it's been even longer than that in inflation-adjusted dollars. In 2000, the minimum wage was back at the same level it was in 1950, and there it has remained. And the dreams of earlier reformers, the dreams of sufficient child care, transportation, education, and health care to truly open all workplaces to those who have the skill and inclination to enter them, those dreams are still just dreams. That's where we've been. And then came COVID. Millions have had their jobs terminated or suspended. Either they simply could not work under shutdown conditions, or their employers were so financially stressed that they cut back drastically and, as we know, many times closed, not to reopen. And millions more people had to work in increasingly unsafe conditions because of COVID. And so, among the many upheavals that we have had over the last year and a half, we are experiencing what economists are calling the Great Resignation. People are resigning. They are leaving the workforce in unprecedented numbers. 11 million just this past April through June. Employers who used to get 100 applications for a position report that they're now getting 1 or 2, and sorry, we're short-staffed signs are everywhere. Jobless benefits are about to be cut down to 0 for many workers, so we will see what happens. But many workers have declared that they have no intention of going back to the conditions and pay that they had before. They speak of 80-hour weeks in restaurant kitchens, employers who didn't provide safety training or equipment and let a whole line get sick with COVID rather than tell anyone that someone in the crew had tested positive. The bitterness runs both ways. Many employers perceive these former staff as just plain lazy, paid too much on unemployment to want to work. And it's true that some players in the Great Resignation calculate that it's just not worth their time to go to work. But there's so much more going on. It's called the Great Resignation, but they're not resigned. Far from it. They used to be resigned to dead-end jobs and a drab future, but now they're not resigned. They see alternatives. Not only freedom from a workplace where they didn't feel they were being respected or valued, but These workers who are forming the Great Resignation speak of having more in their lives than work now. Time to walk in the woods, the mind space to develop a new interest, days spent with their families, not just half hours snatched here and there, like at bedtime, at the end of an exhausting day. They're talking about being more than just their jobs. And it's not just the people at the very top of the employment food chain having suddenly the opportunity to think, what kind of work do I want to do and what role do I want work to have in my life? There's a spaciousness now. This space could be a great moment for our country. Instead of being the country with the longest work weeks, shortest vacations, least health care in the industrialized world, we could take this moment to re-envision what work means in the United States. Not just for high-paid, white-collar intellectual workers and creative workers, but for everybody. Here in the 21st century, we could restore the dreams that were ours in the early 20th century and farther back in the 19th and the 18th centuries when people dreamed of work having a more appropriate place in our lives. So what if we cleared the slate in our minds and started from scratch? There is work that has to be done to sustain a community, as Joe said. Some of that work is attractive to some of us, some to others, and it will get done if it pays decently and if the conditions are good and if people are given the training and support they need. Okay, so that takes care of some of the work. For example, the New York Times recently interviewed a restaurant cook who went into the work because he loves to cook. He loves to cook for other people. He loves to cook for his family. But 80-hour weeks cooking on demand beat it out of him. Now he doesn't want to go back to cooking professionally. Maybe if he could work 40 hours, or if his employer wanted to follow a trend and make that 32, he would be happy being a professional cook again. So that's work that somebody has an interest in. But then what do we do about the work that nobody wants to do? It's dangerous or boring or unpleasant, or it destroys the body fast. If we cleared the slate and said, okay, there's some work that needs to get done, but there's no one yet to do it, how would we make sure that it got done? Well, how do you divide up your unpleasant chores at home? No cheating and paying somebody else outside the house to do them. You divide it up fairly. You take turns. For the worst cases where nobody wants to do this work, I don't know, uranium mining, you allot it by lottery, say? One way or another, if we were creating a fair system from scratch, we would make sure that no one had to do it every day for the rest of their lives. We would make sure that we all shared the burden because we all need the results. And instead, what we've done is arrange things so that nobody would do this work if they had a choice, and then the economy is arranged so that some people have no choice. I'm wondering, what if we, as people of deep principle, aligned the way we arrange work with our principles? What if we aligned work with our principles? And when I say we, I don't mean the workers primarily. I mean only the most fortunate, those with an unusual amount of leverage, have a lot of options. So this isn't for workers to do. And I don't mean how the employers align work. I mean, That's important. Some companies absolutely are greedy. They could pay their workers triple what they do, 10 times what they do right now without feeling the pinch. People like Jeff Bezos and the Walton family, their stocks go up and up. They get richer and richer, and owners and CEOs and stockholders get rich while workers lose ground. But many employers don't have that many choices either. Restaurants operating on a slim profit margin can't just increase their prices dramatically or increase their pay dramatically. Businesses that would like to treat their staff better often are competing with those who have no such principles. So we can't leave it only up to workers, and we can't leave it only up to employers. No, when I say it is we who will have to align the U.S. work world with our principles, I mean all of us. Those of us who make the laws, who vote in those who make the laws, who set the standards, who put in the floor and say, you simply cannot go any lower, so that no one can undercut their competition by slashing wages to a starvation level or leaving the workplace a dangerous place to be. Previous generations have put in so many protections. They put in the minimum wage, and they limited child labor and created schools instead, and they capped hours at 40, and they created OSHA and worker protections, and they fought for unionization that would give workers bargaining power. But we have let all those things slide over the generations since. And we know that it can be done differently because we're not the only country in the world. And other countries are providing health care and shorter hours and longer parental and family leave and better conditions, and their businesses, their workers are thriving. So right now, things are a little different than they've been for a long time. They're a lot different. This is a rare moment when we have some leverage to say, it hasn't been working. Not just the moral leverage, but the economic leverage. Everybody's feeling like this doesn't work. We can't find our workers. Our workers are saying, I can't go back to that kind of job and live the kind of life that is worth living, that I was promised in the American dream if I just worked hard. So are we going to give up this moment? Are we so resigned to the way things are, as if they're permanent facts of nature? They're not. They're not laws of nature handed down by God. They are our laws. We made them for the advantage of some, and we can remake them for the advantage of us all, as those of us who are committed to justice, equity, and compassion in human relations surely want to do. Resignation is not a neutral attitude. It's really not any different than apathy. It's really not any different than cynicism. And our commitment to justice, equity, and compassion demands that we be more than that. So let us be inspired by those who are re-examining work in this moment. Let us make the most of the fact that things have been so shaken up and that people are saying, surely there's something else we can put ahead of us instead of just going back to the way things were. It wasn't working. It was broken. And we know we can do better than this because we have done better and people all around the world have done better. In honor of all our hard work and all the work of all the people around us this Labor Day, let us summon our principles and all our energy and optimism and turn away from resignation and move us closer to the country we dream of inhabiting. I love being here and looking around this space and looking at the screen, the cameras, and the folks making them work. Looking at the mattresses and the footlockers of those who are staying here this month. And seeing everything we do to create this space. It's not just out of wood and glass. It's not just out of mattresses and dinners and volunteered time. It's not just out of electricity and binary signals, though all of these things are part of what we're creating. It's made out of our presence, out of our gathering in whatever ways we do, choosing to be together. Because we hope and we know that together we can transform our lives into all that we dream of and make our world into one that has only been in our dreams as well. If we are moved by gratitude to each other for creating a community that supports us in this way, we may choose to in turn support with whatever financial resources we can the community of UUCPA. And so we now give and receive the offering. The order of service gives a QR code and link and also information on using text to give via Give Lively. Thank you for helping create this community in all the ways you do, and thank you for your generosity as we go into our offertory. Will you please join in singing now as Bruce leads us in If I Had a Hammer?
If I had a hammer, I'd hammer in the morning, I'd hammer in the evening, all over this land. I'd hammer out danger, I'd hammer out mourning, I'd hammer out a love between my brothers and my sisters, all over this land. If I had a bell, I'd ring it in the morning, I'd ring it in the evening, all over this land. I'd ring out danger, I'd ring out mourning, I'd ring out a love between my brothers and my sisters, all over this land. If I had a song, I'd sing it in the morning, I'd sing it in the evening, all over this land. I'd sing out danger, I'd sing out mourning, I'd sing out a love between my brothers and my sisters, all over this land. Well, I've got a hammer, and I got a bell, and I've got a song to sing all over this land. It's the hammer of justice, it's the bell of freedom, it's a song about a love between my brothers and my sisters, all over this land.
Each other sparks of light when we come together. From the music, from Joe's words, from the readings and the compositions, from the spirit of the musicians, our spark is strengthened. And so we take it with us as we go forth from this place. We take it with us and we offer it, the spark of the smile of each other's faces in those little boxes on the screen, into other lives that we may meet. Before we meet again, let us meet them each with compassion and care. Amen. Thank you, Bill and Stephanie, for your music, as always. Everyone, please stay if you can after the benediction for our virtual coffee time. Got to bring your own coffee, but we can enjoy one another's company. You'll be invited to small group conversations in our breakout rooms, or you can stay here in the main room with me and Joe to discuss the service. You should be able to move between breakout rooms on your own, although Zoom's looking a little odd today, so maybe not. You can always ask Deborah Hines to help you with that. So now let us turn on our sound as well as our video and touch hands virtually like this while we say our benediction together. Go out into the world in peace. Be of good courage. Hold fast to what is good. Return no one evil for evil. Strengthen the faint-hearted. Support the weak. Help the suffering. Rejoice in beauty. Speak love with word and deed. Honor all beings. Amen.